All right, welcome to this episode of Photo Theology, and I'm your host, Doug, and today we are going to have another exciting podcast episode, and it is going to be of the Pentax K1. So just to start off here real quickly, for those of you who haven't caught on to this concept yet, basically, in the past, I did podcasting. I was pretty good at it, and I chosen to use YouTube as my podcasting format now, rather than just to, do a podcasting episode and just, upload it online in some random, I guess you could say podcast outlet online. And the reasoning for it is YouTube has just shown itself to be more unified in terms of, you upload your stuff, that's that, you don't have to worry about broken links or, broken this, that, or the other. There's a greater deal of, I'm just going to say, maintenance that you have going on here versus, I want to say, other sites, no matter how good they are. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when I feel, in the sense of going out and actually getting a brand new podcast service, not that it needs to cost anything or anything like that. What I'll be able to do is simply just rip the audios from these episodes and simply throw them on there, and then poof, there you go. Yet again, that's that. So there are a couple of reasons to why I'm doing my podcast episodes through YouTube themselves. And I just wanted to make that clear. So let's get into it. Okay. The Pentax K1, not to be confused with the K01, which is the camera that I own, has been the most anticipated full frame camera, I would say, of all time. And what I mean by that is this, is that a lot of people who have looked at Pentax as a brand from the 35 millimeter days, and a lot of people who actually wanted to get into Pentax as a brand from a digital camera perspective, have wanted Pentax to create a full frame camera. Now, Pentax had tried this early on. They tried it back in the days of the 6 megapixel era, and they came out with a full frame. It was a prototype, essentially, with Philips, who was their sensor manufacturer, and Pentax just deemed it too expensive. And they didn't deem that CCD technology justified the performance of what full frame should be at 6 megapixel. Now, the thing that you have to understand about this is that Pentax is a brand that has been really good at gauging sensor performance. I would arguably say, aside from Fuji, they are the best brand on the market that can gauge sensor performance. In other words, they can look at a sensor and they can tell you, this is how much performance you can really get out of this sensor. So this is a good sensor to go with, and this is not. Pentax has proven this time and time again with camera sensors. They've proven it. And they have always made the decision that full frame was never worth the value that you put into it. Now, that has changed, and I'll tell you why it's changed here later on in this episode, but that has just changed recently. And like I said, I'll get into that a little bit later. But the thing you got to understand about Pentax is they are a highly disciplined brand. They are a brand that does not just throw spaghetti onto the wall and hope that something sticks. They're not like Canon. And my example for Canon would be this, and I'll go with a more recent example here for what I mean by a brand that's undisciplined in terms of what they make. Where Canon has basically, for the past, I'm going to say 2 months, been hit with a PR problem. Everybody is coming out with brand new cameras except for them. Nikon came out with the announcement of their D5, full frame high speed camera, and their D500 crop frame, a high speed camera. They came out with those. Fuji came out with their X70 and a fixed lens camera, and their X Pro 2. Olympus came out with their beautiful F mirrorless camera. They came out with that. Panasonic has been, just kicking stuff around. And Sony, you really haven't heard much from. But their A7 Mark II series cameras are now really starting to take off. So we're starting to hear more about them from that end. But Sony did, announce their A6300. So, needless to say, Canon, what they did was they announced in the midst of all this that, hey, we're coming out with a 1DX Mark II. Now, that was awesome news. And we haven't talked about that yet on Photo Theology, but we will. We'll even do a head-to-head, match against it in the Nikon D5. But they came out with that, and that was some awesome news. And then, it kind of got, squashed when pentax came out with, essentially their Pentax K1. So what does Canon do? They say, oh, we're coming out with a Canon ADD. Now think about all the cameras that I've mentioned here, okay? The Nikon D500 is within the Nikon realm of cameras, is going to be a legendary camera because it's going to replace obviously the D300, verbatim for verbatim, that's what's going to happen. And then of course the D5 is going to replace the D4, that's what's going to happen there, lineup, so you're going to have that. You think about Fuji and their X Pro series. Well, they're coming out with, a fixed lens X70, which is actually a direct competitor to cell phones. That's what it's going to be. I mean, that's what it's designed for, which we'll get into in a later episode. Their EX2, which is definitely, they're making the move to make that a compact, shall we say, Sony Nex or Alpha 1000 based unit. And then of course their EX2, which clearly is their EX2, which is clearly their new and improved, sensor. So they're like, hey, look at what we've got going on here. And then Olympus with their F unit, their F series that they're starting up now, that thing's just a beauty unto itself. I mean, we can't even give it justice by mentioning it in this episode, therefore we will not, but it doesn't get any sexier than that. Like, they are really taking it to, Fuji as a brand, essentially. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. And what I mean by that is in terms of ergonomics. Like, finally somebody is starting to realize, hey, we need to build cameras that look good if we plan to sell cameras, which Olympus does make beautiful cameras, by the way. But this camera here, their new F unit, honestly, I'd probably say it looks better than anything Fuji's got in their assortment. Now, cameras aren't based on looks, so I don't want to be that shallow guy that says, oh, I bought a camera because it looked good. But sometimes for the profession that you do, you actually do that. But my point is, this camera looks so good, it would make Leica blush. So we then start, and then of course, you've got Sony, and like I said, their A Mark II series, or A7 Mark II series, has just done extremely well. You've seen them hit it hard. And then of course, Sony also has got that, joke of a camera, which is the A6300 coming out, pretty soon. So they've got that. And we'll talk about that again in a later episode. So then we start looking at Canon and we say, okay, wow, you got this 1DX. All right. This is really important. Okay. All right. Then, of course, it subsides. No one's really enthusiastic about it for whatever reason. I don't know. Well, I do kind of know. And when we talk about that camera, we'll give it its fair due, because I think it's amazing. I think it's personally amazing coming out of Canon. Okay. But Then, of course, Pentax came out with their K1, which totally just flatlined the 1DX. And pretty much every camera that came out, except for, I'd probably say, the Olympus, except for that one, because I think that was an easy camera for most reviewers to talk about, because they had more access to it. But what Canon did in turn was they said, well, here, we know what we'll do. Let us announce a Canon 80D. There we go. Let's announce a Canon 80D. And when I saw this, I'm like, what? Are you guys serious? On the day that Pentax announces a K1 full frame camera, you guys were dumb enough. You were dumb enough to announce the Canon 80D. That looked it looked so trivial, just from a marketing perspective. From a PR perspective, that just looked bad. It looked really, really bad. And obviously Canon wants to stay relevant, but right now they don't have cameras that really have relevance, which is the problem that they're facing. And that's the reality. Now, for those of you who are probably listening to this and thinking to yourself, Doug, what about the point and shoot cameras everybody talked about? Yeah, nobody cares about those right now. Okay. We can have a different conversation a different day about point and shoot cameras, but that's what happens when you're undisciplined. That is exactly what happens when you're undisciplined. I remember when Pentax released their K5 camera. And it was funny because Nikon came out that day, released their D7000. They announced it at the exact same time. And Nikon said, we're going to have the best low light shooting performance on the market. They had made that statement that their camera lineup would now have the best low light shooting performance on the market. Because they were so confident in their D7000 going forward. And what happened? Literally, the Pentax K5 came in and ran it into the ground. It crushed it. It demolished it. It wiped the floor with it. And it did more than that. The Pentax K5 took down the Canon 5D Mark II. That's what they did. This is what discipline is all about. When you have something to announce, it better be worth announcing. Otherwise, just announce it on another day. And that's what you ought to do, But, Canon desperately trying to essentially suppress the announcement, which it didn't work. If you've seen the buzz for the past, I want to say, week to week or so, week plus on this thing, DP Review of all places, man, they're just trying to sit up here and tell the whole story of Pentax all of a sudden and the re-emergence and a full frame camera, that you'd think that they would act like Pentax was the second coming. Although in the past, they never really gave Pentax a fair shake. All of a sudden now, we got to talk about them. And the reason's simple. What Pentax did, which was a really smart move, is right from the jump with this camera, from a full frame perspective, they allowed limited access. They allowed limited access, which, at first I was kind of like, you know what, you guys probably should do more than limited access. You need to get this thing out there. You need to get people talking about it. But then the more I thought about it, I thought to myself, when did any of these reviewers ever respect you as a brand? And respect your methodology of camera production? They never did. None of them ever did. And that's one of the things where I think the K1 changes the game. But we'll get into that here in a second. So let's backtrack a little bit here. So like I said, Pentax is a brand who's been making cameras for a very, very long time. We're not going to get into back when they were called another brand and then transferred over to something else and then became Pentax and so on and so on. We're not doing all that stuff, okay? You want that, you just go look at Wikipedia, and about a good probably 90% of what they're going to tell you is going to be right. Maybe even 100% will. But don't always believe what you read online. So throw out that disclaimer. But anyways, seriously speaking, Pentax has been doing it for a long time. And Pentax has had many successes throughout their lineup. The first real groundbreaking success by far was the K20D. That camera is held by most in the digital camera community as the best camera of all time. That is what it's held as. And what I mean by that is you talk about the era in which it was made versus its output versus the competition of what it was. The Pentax K20D was an amazing camera. It was, and by the way, I own one here. Okay, so I'll throw out that too. But it was an amazing camera and is still an amazing camera. You know, the Pentax K20D can still even hang with the cameras of today. Now, granted, its effect would be marginalized by today's camera market, but the Pentax K20D brought a brand new way of thinking when it came to camera creation, and in a definitive way that established Pentex's almost, I would say, ethos when it came to camera creation, which was you go with the best resources to get the best output. Now, there's something to be said about this, okay? Because there are cameras in today's market that are still trying to catch up to the Pentax K20D. You know, the Pentax K20D was the first real camera that showed everybody this is how a digital camera ought to be built. It was the first real one where you had a camera not only where you could control your hues, your saturations, and all that stuff on the fly, but it also showed you how to use it in a live screen mode, which most cameras couldn't do that. So literally with the camera, you could preset your shot in terms of your color casting, your textures, hues, sharpness level, exposure, dynamic range. You could set that all up before you even took the picture. You had this ability. And this is one of the things that made the camera so revolutionary. But the file sizes on that thing, 14 megapixels, like 22 megabyte file sizes. This is back when JPEGs really mattered. You know? And this camera was literally made where the JPEG mattered as much as the RAW file did, which was 22 megabytes. Like both the JPEG and the RAW file were both the same file size. You know, Pentax used DNG. They adopted the concepts of DNG, and they said, yeah, we have our own Pentax file type, but you know what, DNG, let's do that too. And that was another thing. These guys weren't hoarders of their consumers and trying to not proprietary, but trying to make things proprietary. That's what I meant to say. In terms of how you had to do this, that, or the other, which again makes a huge difference, you know, because you have a greater chance of success by using DNG for other programs to be able to pick you up in terms of an actual camera type, and then quickly be able to obviously utilize your RAW capabilities and stuff like that. But most importantly about the camera was its actual output and performance. It had an auto white balance corrector. It had that. And if you wanted to do a manual white balance corrector, then of course, again, you could use live view capabilities to do so. They were primitive by nature, but still, they worked, and they worked perfectly fine. You had your ISO performance. And the ISO performance, oh my God, that was just off the chain. You had a 6400 ISO performance. Now, some people are going to go 6400 ISO performance. Realize we're talking like 2008 or something like that. Trust me, ISO performance, very important back then. But not in the way that you guys would think. Because Pentax actually had usable ISO performance. But this camera also did something else. It had built-in autofocusing calibration ability. So you could pop any lens you want on there, and then you could actually, calibrate its focusing, provided it was a good lens, within, an acceptable, margin of error, where you couldn't do that with other manufacturers. But there was one other thing about this camera that made this camera so amazing. It was the first cropped sensor camera that beat the first full frame camera definitively. And by definitively, I mean the Canon 5D, which was the mainstay of what most people went after at that point in time, did not hold a candle to the Pentax K20D. A lot of people forget this. A lot of people tend to forget when they talk about the Canon 5D series, and they talk about the Canon 5D, Mark 1, or basically just the Canon 5D. A lot of people forget how Pentax single-handedly dismantled that camera in front of the whole world with a camera that was superior to the Canon camera. And the K20D was it. It was an SLR killer. Now, there had been many manufacturers that had tried to produce SLR killers in different type of camera systems and with different styles of units. But the unit that was definitively the winner in resolution, ISO performance, in your, I want to say, image adjustments, and then to tack it off, sharpness of image, it was the Pentax K20D. There was no other camera that touched that camera literally until you get way, way, way into the future, where the cameras are like literally superior. Now, I'm not talking something like the Sony, A900 or something like that. I mean, that's on a different level than obviously what the Pentax K20D would be, but it would be a long, long time before cameras would get to the level of the Pentax K20D. And that's something that has to be stated. Now, I don't want to discredit those who are Olympus and Panasonic users and will, raise their hand and say, well, what about Live Moss? What about the fact that the Olympus, E-series was able to project full frame performance, but it didn't cost that crazy full frame price? What about them? It's true, the Olympus did that, but what did the Olympus lack? Low light shooting performance. That's the difference between the Live Moss system and the Pentaxian system. Also, when you talk about lenses, there were certain lenses, and even till this very day, that Canon has not been able to reduplicate. Namely, one that comes to my mind is the Pentaxian, or it's actually just the Pentax. It's not the Pentaxian, but the Pentax 50-135. It might as well just be their holy grail of lens, because no manufacturer has been able to produce that lens to any level of efficiency. I mean, you'd swear that thing was made by Leica or somebody else, but it's made by Pentax. So my point to what I'm going after here is that Pentax, just early on in the game, they knew what they were doing, and, they had a couple of hiccups after that, success. They got drunk with success and made some stupid cameras like the Pentax K7. They made that piece. That was definitely not one of the best things they ever did. But it was their attempt to modernize their cameras. They actually made a better camera than that, which was a lower performing camera, which was the Pentax KX, go figure. And they were made at the same time, by the way. And then Pentax got out of their drunken state of reminiscing of success and created the Pentax K5. Now, the K5 changed everything, okay? Because Pentax reemerged as the SLR full frame killer. That's what they reemerged as. They reemerged as the digital SLR that was a crop sensor that was a full frame killer. We did it right here on Phototheology. In fact, I think it was my first video. And true to form, the Pentax K5 literally took down. It took down the Canon 5D Mark II. You know, and what's so amazing about it is you think about Nikon at this point in time, and all these people ran out and said, well, the Nikon D7000, it has a much better image than what the Pentax. It was a much better image, better ISO performance, all this stuff. And you know what was amazing? Here's what was amazing about the entire thing. None of them had ever tested it. None of them had ever given it a chance. They all made it up. Because when we tested it here on Phototheology, what happened? The Pentax kicked the Canon 5D Mark II's ass. Which the Canon 5D Mark II was superior to the Nikon D7000. I had said a long time ago I was going to do a comparison between the two, but I didn't even waste my time. After I did that, I was like, why am I going to even waste a moment of my life, you know, doing a versus battle between these two when clearly the Pentax just utterly kicked, you know, the Canon's ass. And by the way, I did actually do it internally. I just never released it because I just didn't want to waste my time talking about it. Okay, because obviously I was going to have to add some context to it, and I just didn't feel like doing that. But yes, the Pentax K5 II, I'm sorry, K5, not K5 II, but K5 just took down the Canon full frame. That's what happened. And Nikon's full frames weren't really of relevance. I'll put it that way. They're not, at that given point in time, Canon was like the status quo when it came to full frames. They were. Now, the K5 was such a success that Pentax did come out with a K5 II / K5 II S series. They came out with, you know, a brand new series of camera. And Pentax again did it over again. 16 megapixel sensor. You know, and with their imaging processor, their prime imaging processor, they just literally ran Canon through the ground. And you had a choice of a low pass filter and no low pass filter. You know, Pentax built it in both ways. But what was so amazing about it was when you get to the K5 II, those two cameras were able to, you know, unequivocally defeat the Canon 5D Mark III. Now, when you talk about the Canon 5D Mark III, what you got to remember here is this. This is where Canon set up here and used their, you know, Digix 5, you know, processors, and, you know, they were supposed to have like 20 whatever times the performance of their Digix 4 processors, and you know, they were using dual imaging processors and what have you not. And it was bad. The fact that Pentax could come out with one imaging processor versus Canon using multi-imaging processors. The fact that Pentax was able to come out with a 16 megapixel sensor that was a crop sensor versus Canon using a 20-ish megapixel sensor. And the price differences between them. The Canon costs like $3,500. The Pentax, you know, obviously nowhere near that. You know, you're talking about like $1,200 or something like that. It was relatively inexpensive in comparison. It was like a third of the price. Not even joking around. The Pentax was like a third of the price. You know, and again, Canon just got whomped. They got whomped again. You know, but it went further than that because Pentax was able to compete at the level of the Canon 1DX. That's what they were able to do. That's exactly what they were able to do. So Pentax has had a series of cameras that have just done very, very well. And they established the concept of you don't need full frame to get full frame results. Now, there are going to be people who are going to listen to this, and of course, I understand they're going to say, well, what about, you know, depth of field, you know, in lens multipliers and all that fun stuff there. And I'm going to tell you right now, when you have certain gear that you work with, You just figure out a way to make it work. That's what you do, you know? So when a Canon full frame user uses a 50 millimeter lens, you know, we'll say 1.8 or 1.4 to take a shot, then obviously if I want to get the same kind of effect, I'm going to have to use something like a, you know, 35 or below, you know, not even a 35, like a 30-ish or below, and still, you know, keep that kind of, you know, obvious, keep that aperture. And I also have to keep in mind that I'm going to have to get closer to my subject, you know, so on and so forth, to try to simulate what full frame is. Okay, so the difference between cropped and full frame is you do have to you have to think of a different lens assortment. So when you're thinking full frame, but you decide on cropped, then what you have to always do is you always have to think about the full frame effect and then emulate that through your crop sensor based lenses, what would be the best matchup for it. And then of course, understand you're going to have to get a little bit closer. You're going to have to get that same effect. You know, so there are certain things that play into it, and I'm not denying any of that, okay? But what I'm also going to say is that in the end, it really doesn't matter. Because if you pick up good gear, and if you accustom yourself to your gear, and if you're able to create a form of centricity between you and your gear, provided it is good gear, okay? I mean, I'm not saying you can do this with a Canon Rebel or something. Then you can get phenomenal photos. You can do that. You can get what you're going after. It's not impossible to do. You know, and keep in mind, your pentax cameras normally are weather sealed, and I mean, you can dump buckets of water on them and all sorts of stuff. So pentax has got a lot of great stuff going on. So something interesting really happened when Pentax released their K3 series, which was, I want to say in the past, you know, like two-ish years or so. We'll say 2 to 3 years. They released their K3 series. What they did is they stepped away from the concepts of having full frame killers. Like Pentax was clearly no longer interested in doing that. They were no longer interested in creating full frame killers. Cameras that were crop sensors that could outperform full frame units. Part of this came down to a choice in resolution. By this time, Ricoh, you know, had taken over Pentax entirely. And you could clearly see the influences in the Pentax divisions during this time, you know, beginning to creep in. And Ricoh's attitude was, there's a difference between coming out with something that is a killer and then coming out with something that is marketable that can sell. And what I mean by that is Ricoh understood that they could come out with, because they own Pentax, of course, they could have Pentax come out with crop sensor killer after crop sensor killer. They could do that all day long, but it hasn't moved the needle. Because had it moved the needle, Pentax never would have been bought out by Ricoh. You know, that's just a reality. So what happened was they went about it a different way. The first thing is this, is they decided during the time, basically, of the K5 II era, that they were going to come out with medium format. So the first thing about image quality was this. If you want better image quality, then guess what? We're going to build medium format. And we're going to give you that image quality. In other words, if you want an image that's going to surpass a Canon, you know, 5D, or I'm sorry, not a Canon 5D, a Canon 1DX. If you want something that's going to basically surpass a Nikon, you know, D810, if you want a camera that's going to do that, we're going to build that for you, but we're not going to build it at a third of the price anymore. What we're going to do is build it within the realm of medium format. Now, why was this important for Ricoh to do? Or Ricoh Pentax to do? Why was it important for them to do? It was important for this reason. It created an artificial ceiling. Because what happened after that was you started to see higher end photographers begin to gravitate towards Pentax's medium format style of camera. And the reason for it was a smart investment. Understand, by Pentax going to medium format, it gave Pentax an ability to unleash a level of image quality they could not do previously. But the catch is they did it at a price point of under $10,000, which for a lot of these, photographers who were using Canon, and Nikon premium grade cameras, they were spending $6,000 to $7,000 on those cameras anyways. So they were already used to the idea of a 10,000-ish investment into a camera. So what you start to see is Pentax begin to peel away the layers of the onions of Nikon and Canon. Now, they do it just effectively enough that Nikon and Canon could no longer build cameras above the price of what their medium format cameras are. So Canon attempted to, I want to say it's back in 2013. It was either, no, I take that back. I think it was not 2013, 2014. Canon attempted to, I think it was back in 2014, wanted to build a camera that was, it was like $11,000. That's what it was. It was like 11 to 12 actually. They were going to build a camera and it was going to have, initially the rumors were it was supposed to have 4K and all this other stuff. But in the end, the camera was going to cost like an amazing chunk of change. They released their quarterly earnings for the third quarter of the fourth quarter of the holiday season, and profits were down, and they said, we're not doing this. Lo and behold, like 2 years later, they come out with, the Canon, the 1DX Mark II, which is like half the price of what that camera is. So that's another reason why I think, the 1DX Mark II is just an amazing camera in and of itself, because Canon disciplined themselves and said, you know what, we're not going to sit up here and charge like $12,000 in the way that we originally thought we could for something like this. But medium format basically just killed it there. It set the ceiling for how expensive a camera could be. And it didn't just set it for like Nikon and Canon, but it even impacted brands like Leica. Don't forget that Leica came out with their Type 601, which is like $7,500. I mean, granted, it's a little more expensive than the Pentax medium format cameras now, which are about 68-ish or so. But regardless of that, it's impacted brands like Leica, Hasselblad, Phase One. It's impacted quite a few brands. But in doing that, in achieving dominance and dynamic range superiority, which is what Pentax did, Pentax realized they couldn't do that with crop sensors anymore. That the key to success was resolution and was output. So they went to their, to their venture of their K3 series. Now the K3 series was a brand new chapter in Pentax development. Understand the 645 D and Z, which were the medium format cameras, established a brand new status quo for how Ricoh Pentax would go forward. But the Pentax K3 was even more impactful because that camera series was about marketing technology. Now, all the while, during the development of the Pentax K3 series, Pentax is developing a full frame that nobody knows about. Okay? And originally, it was believed it would come out, in 2014, maybe 2015, early 2015, late 2014, early 2015, it was going to be 24 megapixels. That's So they believed. But it turned out in the end, nope, it was the pentax, it was just the K3 series that Pentax was doing. And what you ended up getting from Pentax was you ended up getting actually quite a few things that were pretty amazing. The first thing was this, is they came out with a brand new sensor system, which was sensor shift. Now, the reason to why this was incredible was because prior to Pentax, there were only 3 manufacturers that have ever dealt with this type of technology, but in their own way, that have been recognized for it. Fuji had pixel shift with their, CCD technology. They had pixel shift. What that meant was Fuji had the ability to fuse pixels together, to overlay pixels, so on and so forth. And we're talking about, yes, the actual megapixels that you shoot with your camera. They were the first to get real credit for it, and it worked. You then had Nokia, which used a very similar system of pixel shift. And they announced this in their cell phone lineup, and basically what they had is they were building 40 some megapixel phones that they made 30 some megapixels or whatever. And then you had different shifting mechanisms to actually give your phone longer zoom. So in order to get your longer zoom, you would go from a 40, we'll say, to a 5 megapixel, so on and so forth, that kind of thing, and the pixels would overlay to emulate zooms and all sorts of stuff. And also better low light shooting performance and things like that. But then what happened was Olympus came along and they said, well, instead of, messing with pixels, why don't we simply just shift the sensor in a multi-shot format? So that's what happened. They used a shifting of the sensor to shift the pixel over so that they could achieve a high resolution shot. This is what Olympus did. But Pentax, being the smarter of all the brands, said, well, why don't we essentially implement Fuji's concept of pixel shift, but in the form of a sensor shift? Now, this is really important to understand, because what Pentax was basically marketing now was, and this is in the K3 too, by the way, is they were marketing sensor technology, which is something that they've lacked the entire time. You got to remember, they were coming out with crop camera killers, but the problem was they weren't marketing sensor technology. And marketing an imaging processor is not always the best way to do things, because if you market your imaging processor, it doesn't take much for another manufacturer to come out and make a more powerful imaging processor. AKA, Canon had their Digic 6 imaging processor. Pentax had their, Prime imaging processor. Pentax crushed Canon's, I'm sorry, not Digic 6, but Digic 5, that's what I'm going to say. Digic 5 imaging processor. Canon came out and crushed that thing. And, that thing was supposed to be 20 times more powerful or whatever they claimed it was. It was some ridiculous number, by the way. Whatever they claimed it was, and Pentax just wiped it out at a third of the price. Not to mention Fuji did the same thing. And Fuji's image quality and output was twice that of Pentax's. So my point of what I'm going after is Pentax has learned along the way how to market things in the correct format. And sensor shift is just one of them. Okay, now they were able to, through sensor shift, capitalize on things like dynamic range, capitalize on things like resolution and sharpness, capitalize on noise control. They're able to basically set it up where they're able to give you a fuller image through a multi-shot system. And the reason for it is every part of the image gets the primary colors because the sensor essentially shifts in that direction. or in a direction that gives you that. Okay. So let's say that your sensor is at spot A, and in slot 1 is a red pixel. Well, what happens is in slot 1, the sensor moves to the left and puts the second pixel now into, what would normally be slot 2 into slot 1, which now the picture is being reshot, but instead what you end up getting is you end up getting the blue pixel. Then it shifts over to the left again, and you get, slot 3 instead of having slot 2 there, which is a green pixel. You get my point. And actually it works like a clockwise motion. It doesn't actually just move, 1, 2, 3 over to the left. It doesn't do that. I'm just oversimplifying it here. But my point is, for what I'm telling you guys, is that they're able to shift the entire sensor. And by shifting the entire sensor, it guarantees that every part of the image gets the full primary color endorsement of light taken. That's what you get there. So it's a very, I would say, interesting thing that you got going on there. And although I am a huge fan of pixel shift, when it comes to sensor shift, I'm not really that concerned about it, but I do see the common sense initiative there with what they have going on. And, one of the real interesting things about it is sensor types. So pentax realized that with their sensor type, they couldn't do a resolution boost. They had tried it, but it didn't work. It just didn't. And it's interesting because they have medium format. And what they realized was that they could not do a sensor shift and actually achieve greater resolutions like Olympus could, that could compete with their, and basically deal with medium format, which is what it would have to go after. So they decided to step away from that and just have reinforced resolution, clarity, and color casting, so on and so forth. And it worked out perfectly from their perspective. And then you've also got, I want to say, like mechanical shutters and just their RGB, light matrixing system and so on and so forth. And you got all sorts of stuff. Okay. But the bottom line is that, Pentax was able to market through the K3 and the K3 II, which, by the way, most of the mechanical stuff, or most of the mechanical evolution that was marketed was in the K3. The sensor shift was in the K3 II. The bottom line is Pentax was able to really, kick out quite a bit from there with the K3 series. So then what happens is, of course, Pentax is basically in this limbo. It's like, well, you've got this new K3 system out here. You got this medium format system out here. One camera costs like $700. The other camera costs, starting off about, 3,000-ish. What are we going to do? And then, of course, Pentax dropped it. Boom. Right in February of 2016. They said, here's our full frame camera. Now, what makes the K1 so amazing is this, is you've got to look at the K1 in its entirety. You have to do that to understand how crucial this camera is, A, to the camera market, but B, more importantly, rather than that, it's how crucial this camera is to the Pentaxian lineup. The K1, and I had to think really hard on this, and this is one of the reasons why I didn't just run off and do the episode. I had to actually think on this, because at first when I looked at the camera, I was like, yeah, I like it. And then I saw some things I didn't like, and I said, no, not going to happen, not for me. And then I sat down and I gave it a day or two, and I started thinking about, in terms of its specifications, how it was built and stuff like that. I started actually thinking about, in terms of the camera, what was its intended goal? What was literally the intended goal? What is it trying to do? Because my discrepancy with the camera was a very simple discrepancy. It only shot 4.4 frames a second. or 4.5 frames a second at full 36 megapixel full frame resolution. But in crop sensor, it shot 6.5. And to me, I found that to be just a bit disingenuous, a pentax. I'm sitting up here looking at this thing and I'm thinking to myself, this camera should be shooting about 7 frames in full frame resolution, if it's 36 megapixels. And then it should also be, shooting about, we'll say 10-ish frames or 10.5 frames in crop mode. Like, this camera was supposed to be the jack of all trades. Like, you can use it as a sports camera. You can use it as a wildlife camera. You can use it as, basically whatever you want to use it as. A studio camera. You can treat it however you want to. That's what you can do with this camera. And I had to start thinking about it. Like, who is this camera intended for? Why would this camera exist in the way that they built it? And what we have to do is we have to look at some of the realities of the camera first. The first thing is this. Pentax decided to go with a 36 megapixel resolution. Now, why go with the 36 megapixel resolution? Well, it's simple. It's what makes actual sense. Everyone else was running out and saying it was going to be a 24 megapixel resolution. I never thought the camera would be a 20-some megapixel resolution. And the reason why I didn't think that was because of sensor shift. It didn't make sense for Pentax to come out with a 24 megapixel crop sensor and then come out with a 24 megapixel full frame and they have sensor shift technology. Because in reality, you don't have a big enough game there. The whole point is sensor shift, in the way that it works, it actually gives you a full frame output, essentially, with the K7 if you implement that system. So there's no need to do that. I mean, granted, 24 megapixels is 24 megapixels, don't get me wrong. 36 megapixels is 36 megapixels, again, don't get me wrong. But if you're looking at sharpness and clarity and all those things, if that's what we're talking about here, you could, with superior sharpness and clarity, you can always interpolate. You can always do that, and you can achieve from a 24 megapixel sensor a 36 megapixel output. You can do that. So Pentax is smart enough to know that you can't do 24 and 24. You can't do that. It wouldn't make any sense. So, I recognize the fact that, it was 36 megapixels. Also recognize the fact that with the camera, you are effectively, looking at an ISO range of anywhere from, let's say, for the sake of the conversation, 200 to 200,000. Now, I'm throwing out rough numbers here. I mean, if you guys really want to know what the hard numbers are, you just go check it out. I mean, they got a website, go look at it. But you talk about the 200 to 200,000. And it's clear that with this 36 megapixel sensor, they're going after like Canon 5, or I'm sorry, not 5, but Canon 1DX Mark II ISO range performance. And that told me that basically what they're doing is they're bringing back essentially the Pentax K5 to low light shooting performance that the K3 lacks. So you have that right there, which is definitive. So one of the key differences between the K5 II and the K3 series is the K3 series is not all that great when it goes to low light shooting. It's kind of funny. I released, this video on the K5 II and how great it did. Never released a video on the K3, and there were reasons for it. But simply because I had stepped away from this stuff for a while. But there were people who were coming out and they were saying, "Oh yeah, it's just as good," and stuff like that. And I'm like, I did the test. I done the test internally, and I'm like, no, it's not. But I never really cared. I never really cared to say anything because I was just like, whatever, people are going to be people. It's kind of funny. People don't give Pentax credit when they do stuff right, and then they sit up here and make shit up when they do things wrong and then praise them for it. So I'm like, he can't win with these guys. For all the credit they didn't get in the past, I'll let them have their misperceived, I should say, credit now. But when you look at the ISO ranges, you understand where they're coming from. But also, what you're also looking at here with pentax, and again, this has to be pointed out, is with this camera, you are getting a, weather sealed. You're also getting, literally a tilt screen, or a shift screen. It's not even a tilt screen, it's a shift screen. So you're getting that. And you're still getting the pentaxian system of shooting. And as I thought more and more about it, and I thought to myself, who on earth would buy this camera? Because it's $1,800. And it dawned on me. The K1 is not meant to replace a K7. It's not meant to replace not a K7. The K1 is not meant to replace a K3 user. It's not meant to do that. You're not going to look at a K3 and a K1 and say, yeah, I'm going to sit up here and buy a K1 because I already own a K3. That's not what it's meant to do. It's not meant to do that. The K1 is not meant to be a replacement for a person who's looking for a lighter system than, their medium format. It's not meant to do that. That's not its goal. Its goal is as clear as day, and it's made to serve two purposes based on just its essential design, which is if you are a K20D user, you now have a camera that is a replacement camera to your camera, definitively. Okay? And what I mean by that, by definitively, is this. If you're a K20D user, the frustration that you've always had is that Pentax has never done enough with the crop sensor system in order to earn, for the money that is, earn your undying allegiance. They just never have. Even with the K5, it just wasn't enough. And the K3 could have been enough, except it lacked the low light shooting performance. And this is something that Pentax understood. They understood when they went to 24 megapixels, things weren't going to be the same. They could have made it work at a 20 megapixel, but they had to go that extra 4, and that extra 4, for whatever reason, just kind of hurts things. So what was really interesting about this was, Pentax with their full frame chose a point in time and said, you know what camera user do we want to go after with this camera? And, as I looked through the specs, I'm like, yeah. And then I looked at that frame rate and I'm like, I couldn't do that. And then I had to start thinking, well, wait a minute here. With my K20D, that's what it's been the entire time. All joking aside, it has. The thing shoots at 3 frames a second. And that's the whole thing. If you're a K20D user, you more than likely have not upgraded to a K5 or a, K3 system. And the reason why you have it is very simple, actually. It comes down to 16 megapixels on one camera, okay, which is your K5 II series, 24 megapixels, but worse or low light performance on your K3. Now, the K3, don't get me wrong, is superior when it comes to exposure ability and stuff like that. In other words, it gives up its low light ISO performance in the way that the KS, or not the KS, but the K5 II has it. It gives it up for better dynamic range and stuff like that. That's what it does with the K3 series. So there's a trade-off there. And of course, you're looking at Pentax and you're saying, these guys are investing in medium format. That's where everything's going. So I don't even know if a crop sensor is really worth my time. But now, when you look at the full frame K1, you go, well, wait a second here. I am getting faster frame rates than what I had before. And even if I crop it, I get a 6.5, which means I'm twice as fast as what I had with my K20D. And it's still going to be 15 megapixels versus 14 megapixels with the K20D. But the key is the low light shooting performance that you get along with it, and the sensor shift that you get along with it. You know, you got that prime engine that's like no other. And then on top of that, you got a -3 exposure. You know, you get a solid across the board -3 exposure with, I want to say, the Sofox. I'm just going to call it that. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that thing. I'm going to call it the Sofox autofocusing system that they use. And the way pentax has been with that autofocusing system, they get about a 1/10 of a second on average. On average, they're about a 1/10 of a second, which again is phenomenal because the K20D is a 20th of a second. So literally, your autofocusing abilities in terms of sensitivity, you're going to go from like a -2 to a -3, which is going to be great in and of itself. Which pentax has a true -3 AF system. Like their AF system at -3 shoots the way it would like in broad daylight, which most manufacturers don't do that. So I have to really hit that hard here when we talk about the -3. And when you think about what is a -3 AF system, here's a -3 AF system. Let's do it like this. You turn a light off, you turn the light off in the main room, all right? Then what you do is you turn the light on in the hall. Then you walk back into the main room, and then you start taking pictures. That there is your minus, you know, it's hall light. That's all you need. That's what a minus, a -3 sensitivity on autofocusing exposure can do for you. So, needless to say, the Pentax K1 is masterful in all those areas. But this camera does more than just that. It's very price friendly. It's extremely price friendly. And that's what I like about this camera the most, is that they brought it in at, $1,800. Now compare it to something like the Nikon D10. And I can tell you right now, the Nikon D10 in no way, shape, or form is going to take on the Pentax K1. And here's the reason why it can't do it, okay? Before even using the camera, I can tell you why it can't do it. You want to, and I'll easily tell you why it can't do it. The reason why it can't do it is because Pentax is technologically more advanced than what Nikon is. The thing that you have to understand is that Pentax is able to take Sony's sensor, and they're able to get 2 to 4 times the output of what Nikon can with the same sensor type. That's the difference between the Expeed sensor, the Expeed imaging processor and the Prime imaging processor that are used between Nikon and Pentax. Nikon uses the Expeed, and now they're on to like Expeed 5 or whatever, because the Expeed 4 was a total failure, and the Expeed 3 was a total failure too. I don't even know why I do know why they built an Expeed 4, but the point is they were both, the 3 and the 4 just were total crap compared to the Pentax Prime sensor. I'm sorry, not sensor, I keep saying sensor. Imaging processor, there we go. Pentax Prime imaging processor. And understand they're both taking Sony sensors. So history goes on to Pentax's side. Pentax is able to develop a system that is vastly superior. Again, they didn't want to do that with the K3 because they cared more about quote-unquote dynamic range than anything else, and resolution than anything else, and sensor shift than anything else. There were reasons to why with the K3 they just didn't do that stuff like they should have. Okay, but I understand. They were about marketing mechanics and marketing technology. And here's the thing. The marketing of the K1 is all wrapped up in the K3. So by the time Pentax releases the K3, people aren't talking about sensor shift ability. They're not talking about, the tighter mechanics and all those kind of things that they talked about with the K3. The reason why they're not is because this is common knowledge and it's common belief. Like, in other words, sensor shift works. It's not a sham. This isn't like the old Fuji days where they had, dual pixel, image output and focusing ability, and everyone said, oh, no, it's a total sham, yada, 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 so on and so forth, with their super CCD-HR. It's not that. That's not what this is, which it wasn't a sham. It really did work if you had the right softwares to do it. Unfortunately, places like DP Review and everyone else just didn't know what the hell they were doing with it, so it got a bad rap. What Pentax took is they took technology that they knew was applicable to virtually any kind of setting and said, this is how we're going to market the camera. But we're not going to market the K1's ability through the K1. What we're going to do is we're going to market the camera's ability through the K3 and the K3 II with their technological advancements. And then when the K1 comes around, we're just going to be talking about the fact that this is full frame. That's what's so smart about this camera in the way that they built it. And it took me a second to actually realize what they had done. The whole point is that if you look at the K1 by itself as a standalone thing, you don't think much of the camera. You just go, okay, whatever. But then the moment you bring the K3 and the K3 II into the conversation and you say, okay, wait a second here. All right. So it has these abilities along with the baseline marketing of whatever else they've thrown out there. Then you start to understand where this camera is coming from. And the thing that you have to really understand about this camera is that this camera's mechanics are tight. They are absolutely, positively just phenomenal. Also, the fact that, again, you have the Pentax menu system, which easily allows you to do your adjustments of your hue, saturation, your high key, your low key, your contrast, your exposures, all before you even take the image. This is the camera that very well could be, dare I say, the Fuji killer. The Fuji X killer. This could be the camera that defeats the X-Trans sensor. It's a possibility. I'm not going out and saying that right now, okay? Because we've got to have that conversation for a different day. But this could be it. For myself, who is a Fuji user, and I'm a Pentaxian user, okay? I use both. I can tell you right now, this camera is a camera unlike any other camera in the market, and it strikes a chord. The first thing that it does is this. It reshifts the balance of pricing when it comes to our SLRs. It does that. Pentax goes with an older 36 megapixel sensor. That's basically what is believed is going to be found in this camera. Is Nikon's older 36 megapixel sensor. Why am I saying Nikon's? Sony's. There we go. It was found in Nikon, yes. It was found in Sony, yes. But it is the older 30 megapixel sensor with a no low pass filter, but it will have a low pass, simulation effect, which was first found in the K3. Okay, so again, you have to go back and look at the K3 and the K3, 2. You got to look at both of these cameras in order to actually understand where the K1 sits. If you're really wanting to understand its mechanics, its capabilities, and all those things right out of the box, without even needing to touch the thing, all you got to do is learn about those cameras. Then what you have to do is simply just apply the image quality of the K5, we'll say the K5 II, or I'm sorry, not the K5. Oh yeah, I guess it would be K5 II, K5 IIs, slash, think more medium format-ish in terms of what you're going after, and then there you go. But this is really, really big for Pentax, but it also it reshifts the market. So like I said, the first thing is this. This camera is designed for two things. Number one, the K20D user. The K20D user who has never given up their K20D because there's never been a reason to do so. Because no matter what steps Pentax make, they're incremental steps that they make. Well, now that's kind of been shattered. Pentax went with higher resolutions. Pentax went with a different sensor format. Pentax gives you greater exposure sensitivity. Pentax gives you true cross-focusing point capabilities. And we could go on and on about what Pentax does. But the bottom line is, Pentax gives it all to you. There's not much, aside from video, there's not much that the camera's not giving you. And we'll talk about video here in a little bit. But the other thing is this, is that for those people who are looking at the Fuji X-Tran system, okay, for those people who look at Fuji X-Tran and say, you know what, the X-Tran sensor, that's the way of the future. I mean, I love Pentax, but it's not beating that. Pentax is saying, hold the boat. We've got something for you. And it's only $1,800. Now, why is this important? Well, here's why this is important. Because up until now, the Fuji X-Tran unit has essentially overtaken. It has overtaken most full frames in the market. It has. I mean, it's just the truth, and we can just see it for what it is. And the X Pro 2, which we will talk about it here again at a later episode, with its 24 megapixel system, is definitely going to put a chink in the armor of higher end SLRs, full frame SLRs. Like your Nikon, for example, your Nikon D750, kiss it goodbye. It's done. It's over. The verdict is out. Fuji's got them beat. I mean, that's just, all you've got literally is that D810 left. You talk about Sony. And I mean, seriously, we don't need to have a conversation about a Sony A7, 2 or Mark II versus the Fuji, X, X Pro series. We don't need to have that conversation. The Fuji's just beats that thing handedly. It's not even a contest. And and that's the reality. So you've got all these full frames that are literally falling to Fuji, which is a crop sensor. So now Pentax comes out and says, "Oh, no. We're 36 megapixels, number one. Number two, what we want to point out in this is our ISO range is 200 to 200,000. Okay, again, I'm just throwing out general numbers here. Get more specific on their website. Now, why is this important? Because Fuji builds one hell of a camera, but their ISO range doesn't extend that far. And Pentax isn't stupid. They're not going to extend an ISO range out to the nth degree when they know it doesn't work, especially after building a medium format camera like the 645Z. So when you look at the 645Z, which actually does the, it basically has that, we'll say 100 to the 100,000 range ISO performance, which it goes above 100,000. I'm just saying it's in the 100,000 bracket. Pentax is not going to take their camera that they sell for, we'll say for the sake of the conversation here, 6,000 to 7,000 in today's market, and allow it to come within shooting distance of an $1,800 camera. If that $1,800 camera didn't perform the way it should, they're not going to do it. We're not talking Canon here. We're not talking Nikon here. Okay, we're not talking about, manufacturers that just randomly make stuff to make stuff, and then you sit up here and wonder, why did you make that D3200 again, or that D5300, or that D55, when you already have like a D31, or you already got a D32, or I'm sorry, 52, or whatever it is. Yeah, they're not those manufacturers. Like, they don't just make models to make models. That's not what they do. The closest that they ever came to making a model just to make a model, the K5 II versus the K5 IIs. One had a low pass filter, the other one didn't. Then in the K3, they were able to combine the two with a low pass simulation, or just go with the no low pass filter effect whatsoever. And then with the K3, what did you get? Well, of course, you got sensor shift technology, which made the K3 literally the K3. I'm sorry, with the K3 II versus the K3, what'd you get? The sensor shift technology. So literally, what happened there? You had a situation where, Pentax said, look, we're going to build the same model over again, but here's what it's got that the other one doesn't have, which made perfect sense. And you're not spending a whole lot of money on it in order to make it happen. I mean, like, if you're deciding between the two, it's like, for $100 more, $200 more, do you want to do this? This isn't like, in the sense of what Nikon does, where they say, here's a D, 3200, and here's a D 3300. They're $100 difference, but there's really no difference in the output image quality or any of that stuff, except one has a couple more frames that they literally may have a frame over the other, and it uses the Xpeed 4 processor versus the Xpeed 3 processor. So, yeah, that's just really saying one is fine-tuned for Toshiba's shitty image sensor, where the other one is not, fine-tuned for Toshiba's shitty image sensor. So, yeah, that, pentax isn't like that. So you got some differences there. But the camera itself serves the purpose of common sense within the pentax lineup. But what it also does is it sets a cap. It sets a cap. They put a stake in the ground and they say, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. This is exactly what we are going to do. We are going to create a camera that literally is going to be at $1,800, 36 megapixels, and the rest of you bring it on. Now, why is this important? Well, it's simple. How many cameras in the market are 36 megapixels? And what do they cost? That's all you got to ask yourself. That is all you have to ask yourself right there. And then, how many of those cameras actually have a true -3 exposure ability? How many of them have it? And the keyword is true. Not like it can't shoot shallow contrast in low light and, at a -3 exposure. Not that kind of BS. All right, which means it's not truly a -3. It just means that it's like a -2 that can shoot shallow contrast and in low light. I mean, you guys get my point of what I'm saying. This is really important to again understand. Pentax has chosen a method of marketing where they set a ceiling on how much something can cost, and then they come in with something else to compete with the other manufacturer or manufacturers, depending on what we're talking about here. So keep in mind, what did medium format do? Medium format created a ceiling. Nikon and Canon cannot build a camera beyond the price of medium format. If they do, what happens? The consumer switches over to the medium format camera. That's what they do. Normally, that's what happens. It's just as simple as that. And also, their Pentax medium format cameras seem to have a long-lasting lifespan. The shelf life seems to be much longer than a lot of the other cameras that you're seeing out here in today's market. So again, that's to Pentax's benefit. That means they just have lower cost production and stuff like that. So you have that. So Pentax is able to say, hey, you know what? We have our 645Z. It's at $6,000. But oh, wait a second here. Wait a minute. You want high resolution, right? Well, we still have our D out there for around 3,000 or something like that. And then what we have now is we have our 36 megapixel, our 36 megapixel for $1,800. That's a full frame, our K1. That makes all the difference right there, because that K1, what it does is it artificially suppresses, again, the pricing of what you're looking at. It forces Nikon and Canon to basically rethink what they're doing. I mean, think about if you were a person who purchased a Canon 5DS or a 5D SR. Think if you are one of those people, or think if you're one of those people that is about to purchase a Canon 5D or SR, or if you're a Nikonian user and you're thinking about purchasing a D810. Common sense would say, why on earth would you purchase either of those high-res cameras? Now, this would also even speak in the face of Sony. and their A7R2, which is a 42 megapixel. Why would you spend $3,000 on it? And this is the whole thing. Pentax is reshaping the narrative. And these whys are really good whys that you got to ask yourself. You really do have to ask yourself about these whys. I mean, let's face it, Sony's lens assortment for their A7 II series is abysmal. It is terrible. They got the worst lens assortment for any full frame camera out on the market. You know, and they're relying heavily on the Metabones adapter. So you can put your Canon lenses on the Sony and keep your autofocus and all this other stuff. It's like, get the hell out of here with that shit. I mean, damn it, if I sit up here and spend $3,000 on your camera body, you damn well better have a lens I can use with this thing that I want to use. Now, in all fairness, Sony does, of course, have their own, you know, E mount to A adapter. They got that. And you can use, you know, your Konica Minolta, you know, G type lenses, and from the A that they from the A mount system, you could do that. But still, you're going out and buying, you know, an autofocusing adapter for like, what is it, $300 or $350? Then you got to buy the lens on top of that. And if you turn out not to have a built-in stabilizer in your body, then what happens? Yeah, you're screwed. You're really screwed. So Sony is fighting that battle there. Now, I don't think it's the end-all be-all, because I think what Sony is going to ultimately do is they will pull, or basically pull from Canon customers. A lot of people who have been looking at that Canon, I want to say, you know, 5D Mark IV, which is probably not going to materialize for a while. And even for people who have been looking at, you know, I hate to say it, but a Canon 5DR or 5DS, I should say SR actually, but you know what I'm talking about here. The 5DS unit, the Sony A7R II is a real, you know, it's a real thing to look at. It's dangerous for Canon, because you got the Metabones adapter now that allows you to keep your stabilizer, it allows you to keep your autofocusing and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, granted, it costs 600 and some bucks, but hey, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. By the way, I do not believe that the Metabones adapter gives you the true image quality that you would get from a Sony lens. So anybody out there who wants to make that argument that the Metabones adapter is the way to go, no, what you do is this, is go get yourself an E to A mount adapter. And then what you do after that is you use your lenses. Now, the problem with that is that the E to A mount adapter has its own autofocusing system, so you don't use the Sony autofocusing system. That's the trade-off. But regardless of that trade-off, you still get better optical quality that way. And that's what I have to look at, is I have to look at the optics. I've seen the Metabone adapters, and I'm not thoroughly impressed. Not thoroughly impressed. It's okay, but when you get to that high level of glass, it's just not there. You know, it's just not. But again, we talk about pentax, you know, in the K1. Let's not lose sight of this. And what we have to ask ourselves are, okay, all right, pentax still has 36 megapixels. Think about what you're talking about here. 36 megapixels versus 42 megapixels. Do the math. How many megapixels are we talking there? We're talking 6 megapixels, right? You know? 6 plus 4 is 10. Add another 2, you know, to that difference of the 4. That makes 6 megapixels. You're going to sit up here and tell me 6 megapixel difference? That's what you're going to be looking at there? 6 megapixel difference. Yeah, no, Pentax was really smart to actually go with the 36 megapixel sensor. And they already had proven at the point in time when Nikon was using that 36 megapixel sensor, and I think it was the D800E, they were already building cameras that were taking the older Sony 16 megapixel sensor that was being used, you know, in various other things. And they were, getting outputs equal to or greater than the Canon 5D Mark III. So I'm in the least not concerned about the image quality, the dynamic range, or more importantly, the ISO performance. I wouldn't be, because history is all on Pentex's side, and that's really in the end what you're looking at. You're looking at Pentax has built a camera based on history of performance. This is what makes them different from every other manufacturer out there currently. Most manufacturers are trying to overcome their history of performance. Pentax isn't doing that. And this is one of the reasons to why they're so disciplined in what they do and how they do what they do. Is that when they say 36 megapixel camera, no one even disputes the image quality the thing's going to have. No one's up here saying, oh, well, the Nikon D810 is going to have a better image still, though. No, it's not. No one believes that. No one's saying that. And if you're going above the Nikon D810, and if you've got ISO ranges that expand from 200 to 200,000, which let's be fair about it. Let's say that your usable ISO range will probably be, I'm going to go with a probably be, usable ISO range up to 12,000. And at that point, you probably might not want to mess around with lower ISO ranges. Let's just assume that's what it is. Even if that is the case, the fact is that camera is vastly superior to any other camera on the market. And even if you were talking about, we go back again to the Canon 5DS and 5D SR, you go back to those cameras, that 14, what is it? 14? Yeah, I think about 14 megapixel difference. It's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. With the abilities of sensor shift and things like that, which Pentax has, not to mention it does use a 5-axis stabilizer inside. But the abilities of sensor shift and stuff like that, and the abilities for Pentax to be able to shoot freehand now with their new stabilizer and use pixel shift, which is the camera should be able to do that. It can't do like crazy moving subjects like cars and things like that though. But the ability to do those kind of things, it's effectively, it's game over. Pentax is now impacted the high resolution market to 2 degrees. Of course, you have the 45 series, okay, which is medium format. You have the medium format 45 series, which whether you're talking 40 or if you're talking the 50 megapixel camera, they have outstanding image quality for the price. They do. Everybody knows that. And they have the best dynamic range output of any given manufacturer that is currently right now in the world of medium format. Now, this may change here in the future. Just as of now, it doesn't. And then, of course, what you're talking about is you're talking now about a full frame camera, which for all practical purposes mimics the medium format camera. Now, the last thing we got to talk about here, and I got to be fair about it, is let's talk about the lenses. Oh my God, the lenses. Pentax came out with a slew of lenses. They came out with the lenses they needed to come out with. And I'm going to tell you what they needed, and they did it, okay? Here are the lenses that you actually need, okay, to make this thing work. And they did it the first time around. And this is something where I think Fuji had made the mistake for the longest, but now Fuji's in the game with this too, so they're okay. The first thing is this. You need to have a 24 to 70 millimeter lens, f2.8, they got it. 70 to 200 millimeter lens, f2.8, they got it. And you need to have a 100-ish to 400-ish millimeter lens. You know what they got? They got a 150 to 450 millimeter lens. And yes, f4.5 to 5.6. They've got it. Those are the 3 lenses that you need to be real about what you're doing. Now, I know there are going to be people who are going to start talking about what about prime lenses and what about macro lenses and all that. Take a moment and think about what I'm saying here before you even open up your mouth and think that, and then spew that nonsense out, okay? You know they're going to build prime lenses for the thing. Everybody knows that. And you know they're going to build a macro lens for the thing. Again, everybody knows that. All right? But when you talk about assortment, this is for the broader masses. We're talking broader masses here. All right? For general shooting. That's what we are talking about here. Those three lenses, in the way that I listed them, are the most important lenses to have. Now, Pentax came out with quite a few more lenses than that. Okay, and by quite a few, I mean they got quite a few. Not only that, in the way that it works, you can use your crop sensor lenses on the Pentax system, dare I say, and in addition to that, you get full functionality. Now, of course, when it's cropped, it's a 15 megapixel. Now, this was kind of disheartening to a degree because I was hoping that they would do a little bit better than 15 megapixel and they would kick it off to about, I want to say, 16. I was wanting 16 megapixel. That's what I was wanting there. And I could have dealt with that. That means it would have been about a generation behind. But then again, I had to start thinking, well, it's the K20D user they're going after here. It's obvious that's what they're doing. In terms of speed, performance, and all that, it matches more of the K20D, but it's like a true upgrade in every sense of the K20D. So why wouldn't you do that? So there you go. But they do have the lens assortment that they need, and I think yet again, you know, they are phenomenal in terms of what they've done, how they've gone about it, the image quality, the dynamic range, just, you know. All I can say is Pentax is back, baby. Pentax is back. And they're showing it in a really big way. Now, okay, let me quickly hit on the video because I know there are going to be people out there saying, well, Doug, Pentaxian users don't care about video. And guess what? I am going to tell you that's a lie. They do care about video. They just don't shoot with a Pentax camera to shoot their video. But no, seriously speaking here, Pentax, yeah, they made a mistake, and we're gonna get into it. You know, I think probably in the next episode of photo theology here, about Pentax and their video. But yeah, they made a mistake when it came to the video end. I don't think there's any two ways about it. I definitely think that, you know, Pentax had a great chance to make something happen, and they blew it on the video end. But you can't buy this camera for video. I'm going to put it like that. You cannot buy this camera for video. And I think quite honestly, we're going to have to just dedicate a whole episode to video, in the weaknesses of the the K1, because that's going to be, I think for some people, the deciding factor. I'm going to put it to you like this though. $1,800, you're getting a real camera, not a camera/camcorder. That's what you're getting. And I think that it's fair from that respect. But after we do our next episode on video, we'll see how you guys feel about it, you know. And, you know, you guys feel whatever you want to feel. It doesn't bother me. But I do think that where the K1 is priced it's fantastic. Like I said, the only issue I had from a shooting end was frame rate. That's the only thing that I kind of I'm like, but, you know, in all fairness, the prime imaging processor, which actually I don't even think I think they're using Ricoh's imaging processor this time around. And that will be interesting to see how that goes, because there have been those reports that have said that it's going to be Ricoh's imaging processor. There are people who had thought it would be the prime imaging processor. So we'll see what happens there. But the data, I want to say output of that, I think it can only, or it's been estimated, it can only handle between the two of those processors, you know, 160 to I want to say 60-ish. I'm sorry, not 60-ish, but 160 to 200 megabytes. That's what I meant to say. 160 to 200 megabytes. So when you start talking about these massive file sizes that this thing is going to have, because it's 36 megapixel, that may be why the frame rate is as low as it is. And if that is the case, then fine, I get it. But in return, I would have then liked to have seen a greater frame rate on a 15 megapixel end. You know, that's just the way I look at it, you know. Along with uncompressed, I would have liked to have had uncompressed RAW, which, you know, they could have done uncompressed RAW and allowed that to have been 3 frames a second. You know, 5 frames or 4.5 frames, whatever it is, at compressed RAW. And then you get like 9 frames, you know, I mean, like if they would have done like 9, somewhere between 9 to 12 on a crop sensor, I'd have been fine with that. You know, I just like these are the kind of things I look at and I go, why didn't you guys do this? Because that would have been it right there. That would have been it right there. And it would have made perfect sense. Okay. So yeah, if your imaging processor is literally, you know, only 160 megabytes, well then obviously, you know, what you got to do is you got to use some common sense when you're dealing with this thing, you know? So if you feel that you can't blast off more than 160 megabytes in a second, then create it that way. But yeah, that's the give and take of pentax. You find out now. This is the give and take of them, you know, which is great image output, but it is a slower engine in many respects. Now, again, we will get into a conversation about video in the next episode. But I really did want to do this episode. I thought that it was important to do. And I think you guys really should like it. You know, I think you should. For those people who are wondering, would I buy a Pentax K1? The answer is yes. Yes, I would. I totally would. I have used just about all the major Pentax flagship cameras. And I will tell you right now that the Pentax K1, just by their history of camera and the level of passion they put into the development of this camera's not going to fail. It's just not going to. You know, you don't cut the outside world off from the publicity of your product unless you know it's going to be one hell of a product. You don't build other cameras to lead up to your main camera unless that main camera is going to be one hell of a camera. And that's the reality here, which is what is so different from every other manufacturer that's out there, is that these guys built other systems, other camera systems, to promote this camera system in a direct form, and not even an indirect form, but a direct form. So again, if you are a K3 user, you already know how this camera is going to play out from a mechanical end. You know, if you're a K3-2 user, you already know from a sensor shift capability plus mechanics, which you're going to be getting here. If you're a person who's been using their 645 medium format series, then you already know what dynamic range is going to be looking at like with this puppy. So, in ISO control. So, you've got a lot there to mess with. And I don't want to take away from that. And Pentax has really begun to dive into, you know, lenses in the way that they should. Now, keep in mind, they do have macro and they do have prime lenses. I'm just not getting into that stuff because that's a different, you know, conversation for a different day. Because I wouldn't just talk about their lenses. I talk about other lenses as well. But my point is this: Pentax has got it going on. They've got it going on. They know what they're doing and they know how to do what they're doing. So there you go. Okay, so that's all I have to say for now. I'll catch you guys on the flip. So you guys take care. Until next time. All right. Bye-bye.